Before we begin today, a brief content warning. One of the episodes we'll be looking at is the pilot episode of the Lone Gunmen TV series, which does contain situations that bear a strong resemblance to the 9/11 attacks in America. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Things Are Getting Strange, a Lone Gunmen rewatch podcast.
I see what you did there.
Really, I thought it was very subtle. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And do we have any news this time?
I do.
Ooh.
It's on the subject of FileFest, the X-Files convention in Minnesota. We now have a date for it. FileFest is returning in 2025 on August the 30th and 31st, which is Labor Day weekend. It is going to be in Minneapolis, Minnesota again, though the exact location is still TBA. I think it was in the Mall of America last year, but as soon as we find out where that's at and what guests they're getting, we'll keep you updated.
Cool. Should be fun.
I also, via the FileFest Twitter, I know you don't follow the Twitters or anything like that, but I kind of keep an eye on them for you. The FileFest Twitter played a game called X-Files This and That this week, and I thought you might like to take part.
Okay.
So basically, they gave you two options, and you have to pick which is your favourite in each theme.
Okay.
So, first of all, I feel like my Life is Strange streams, I should begin by saying, live or die, make your choice, in the Jigsaw kind of voice, but...
You can put the gun down, you know. We don't do it. This is radio.
Oh, okay.
Hands,
if no one can see
movie.
it. Oh, bless. Anyway, so first up is Mythology or Monster of the Week.
Monster of the Week.
Yeah, I'd probably agree. Fight the Future or I Want to Believe.
Fight the Future.
Well, this is easy so far.
Yeah, not too bad.
Yogurt with bee pollen or sunflower seeds.
I never tried yogurt with bee pollen, so I'm really not sure. And I can take or leave sunflower seeds, so that's actually kind of difficult. Maybe I'll give the yogurt a go.
Okay, I'd have gone with sunflower seeds, so we've diverged for that one at least.
Fair enough.
The Woods or Mulder's Office.
Mulder's office? You feel safer?
It's burnt down and people have been shot in it.
Yeah, but there could be anything in the woods.
Yeah, true. Alright, I'll agree. Mulder's Office. Vancouver or LA?
Vancouver.
Yeah. Mulder's POV in Bad Blood or Scully's?
Ooh, okay. I think I feel Scully's tiredness more than Mulder's. And Mulder being a crackpot actually jibes a lot better than Scully being that flippant.
I like both of them equally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'd probably pick Scully's. The Pilot or The Truth?
Pilot.
Well, that was quick. The Alien Bounty Hunter or The Super Soldiers?
Alien Bounty Hunter.
Yeah, he's a bit iconic, isn't he?
He is.
In spin-off series, The Lone Gunmen or Millennium?
Doesn't feel fair to judge given we've only seen one of them, but Millennium.
I knew you'd say that. Mr. X or Deep Throat?
That's really tough.
Oh, you know I'm an X fangirl.
I don't need an X fangirl. Possibly Mr. X, he's notably more complicated than Deep Throat is.
Cryptic Phone Calls or X Taped on the Window?
X taped on the window.
Yeah, it's a bit more iconic again, isn't it?
It is.
And Samantha Mulder or Melissa Scully?
Ooh, probably Samantha because she has more characterization, although ultimately most of that isn't hers. And Melissa, that is all her, but Melissa's in it so little.
See, she's in it so little, but I think Melissa makes quite a big impression.
She does. I mean, we made that point last week of Reyes is possibly built out of leftover bits of Melissa.
Yeah. Like the Bride of Frankenstein.
Yes.
But yeah, there you go. Sorry to nick your game a bit, FileFest, but I wanted to give Nick the opportunity to play it too, so thanks for that. That gave us a bit of fun there at the start of the episode. A nice warm-up.
That was a good warm-up. Okay, we need it. Although, to be fair, we possibly should have done this between the two episodes.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so we need to get to the spin-off. The one that genuinely is a spin-off, because Millennium exists in a very strange situation in the X-Files.
True, whereas this is a direct spin-off about 3 characters we've seen quite a lot of.
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's Millennium, you've got the connection of Jose Chung and Frank Black actually showing up in the X-Files, but otherwise the two are just completely parallel. whereas this has a few more connections.
It's also kind of interesting, this one, because we already sort of had a soft pilot for the Lone Gunmen within the X-Files series. Well, it's more a two-parter, isn't it, if we're honest?
They're a season apart, so they're not connected at all.
But The Unusual Suspects gave us their origin story, and Three of a Kind kind of wrapped up that little story arc, concerning Holly Modesto.
I'll give you that one. No, that's fair. But yes, we've already basically had the pilot, and it was obvious it was going to work. It's very curious what's happened, even with this pilot. I mean, we could also go with how, like the original series, how we first experienced this, but we both experienced this at the same time and had very similar reactions to the experience of watching Lone Gunmen.
Yeah.
And watching Lone Gunmen again.
Yeah.
We'll have to get to that. So this is Byers, Langley, and Frohike in their own series. I do remember that the notion of an X-Files spin-off series was mooted a long time back.
Prior to this, you mean?
Prior to this. Because it was being mooted. I can't remember when it came up, but basically I was reading SFX at the time, and there was a little thing where basically they were saying they were considering an X-Files spin-off. And my first instinct was, the Lone Gunmen are basically right there, you can do them as a spin-off series. But SFX for some reason started speculating on the vampire from 3, which seemed weird at the time, but even more weird after rewatching 3 and discovering that she basically incinerated herself.
What about someone like Mr. X?
Yeah, I think Deep Throat the Younger Years was mooted. Mr. X, for whatever reason, didn't occur to the writer of the column.
Mm.
Can't remember who else. Maybe Samantha or Cigarette Smoking Man were mooted. I think this was like seasons 4 or 5 kind of time period. So this is quite a long time ago. And then nothing came of it for a long time until the Lone Gunmen series actually did get announced and released. I don't even know how the best to approach this one, given that there's a thing about the pilot and then Jimmy Bond is going to actually shake everything up, which is not unheard of for pilots, but is still weird in this context.
True.
I was thinking about this before, and I don't know if we discuss it now or later. Maybe later, because it was a whole thing about recurring cast in the X-Files. And how, in the X-Files, you have, basically, at the start of the series, you basically have 3 characters that recur. And one of them barely recurs at all. So you have Mulder and Scully, obviously. And you've got Blevins. And Blevins falls off the face of the earth by episode 4 or so.
True.
And stops being relevant at all. And then it's not till Tombs that Mitch Pileggi comes in and Cigarette Smoking Man starts recurring again, and you get them as kind of mainstays after that.
Yeah.
We have a whole first season where it's just Mulder and Scully are the only constants, and everyone else shifts around them.
Yeah.
And then they slowly start accumulating regular characters. So it's interesting that the Lone Gunmen starts, or feels like it should have started with your 3 existing characters.
Which it does.
And they add in another character. We're going to have to talk about her in a little bit. And it's that apparently wasn't good enough, so we immediately have to add another cast member on top of that. There was some trust in the X-Files that wasn't given to the Lone Gunmen.
I'll talk about it when we get to Jimmy Bond, but there is a rational reason for the addition of the other character that early.
Yeah, I'm very curious.
And I'll let you know what it is when we talk about that episode in a bit.
Okay, but so I suppose we better talk about Pilot again. Didn't think we'd be talking about another episode called Pilot.
The first episode of the series is nearly always called Pilot.
It is. I mean, what's interesting is I shared way back when we did the X-Files Pilot that there was a theory from a friend of a friend, I think, of why it was called Pilot, because they didn't understand the TV thing, because they thought it was about the pilot of the UFO.
Oh, yeah.
And that Billy Miles and co were being trained as pilots for this UFO that was abducting them.
And this episode has a kind of plainy sort of theme to it.
Yeah, and there's a pilot in this, so yeah. But no, that's not what it's called, Pilot, we can be safely assured. So, Pilot, directed by Rob Bowman, same director as Fight the Future, and numerous other X-Files episodes. Written by Chris Carter. Don't know if I'll do the sting or not. Vince Gilligan, John Shaban, and Frank Spotnitz.
Oh, they got them all in there.
All of them in this one. First broadcast on the 4th of March 2001. So, regular cast, you all know Byers, Frohike, and Langley. That's fine. But we have one new cast member here, who is Zaleska Robinson, who plays Eve Adele Harlow. We have quite a lot to say about her. The only other thing I've even tangentially seen her in is Lost.
Okay.
But we have several guest stars, and because I didn't know about the X-Files wiki, which would have saved a lot of time digging through the IMDb credits, because I found some odd ones in here.
I do apologise. I've been using that wiki for years now, and
I've been
apparently you
looking
didn't know it
Wikipedia.
existed.
No. Okay, so guest stars. We got George Coe, who plays Bertram Byers. He's in Legend of Korra.
Oh, who does he voice?
No one I recognise,
Oh.
but he's also in Skyrim,
Okay.
Star Trek Next Generation, and Max Headroom.
Well, that's a neat career.
It goes on, though. We also have Wally Dalton, who played Ray Helm, who is Bertram Byers' alleged friend.
Overlord.
He's in Millennium, and he's in the X-Files game.
The game?
The game.
Oh, okay.
He plays Wallace, and I don't remember who on earth that is,
No, I'm not sure.
but he's in the cast list for the game.
Huh.
Who knew? Jim Fife, we know as Kimmy, who's previously played Jimmy and Timmy, or the geeky friend that Lone Gunmen have.
I think he was Jimmy in Three of a
Jimmy.
Kind.
And Timmy must have been the traitorous one.
Mm.
Okay, so we've done his credits before, but I'll remind you, because he was, of course, in The Frighteners.
Oh, of course, he's the younger ghost.
He is the younger
Yeah.
nerdy ghost. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And what I don't think we mentioned last time, because he's uncredited for it, is he's in Ghostbusters 2.
Is he?
Twice. He is the thin Scaleri brother. In the courtroom. The ghost that burst out the slime.
Oh, okay.
He's the thin one.
So he played yet another ghost.
And the ghost jogger that they trap.
Okay.
Getting a bit typecast there,
He's
wasn't
got
he?
a bit of a ghost career. He's great in The Frighteners, though.
He is. But we need to get to that aforementioned pilot of the plane, because this one was one of those old side swipes you don't see coming.
Okay.
So, did you know there's a new Ranma Half series?
I did not.
They started over from the start. It started this year.
Okay.
He is the English narrator for Ranma Half.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay. He also is in, because I found this, credits go descending from current date. He's in Psychonauts 2. He's also in Psychonauts 1.
Oh, who is he?
Could you possibly guess? You've heard him.
Is he going to be someone like Coach Oleander?
No.
Ford.
He is Ford.
Oh.
That's Ford flying that plane.
Literally the game I'm playing at the moment. Yeah.
He's also Clank in Ratchet and Clank.
Okay, that's cute.
He's Swinehart in Wolf Amongst Us.
Okay, yeah.
He's the dub for Bato in Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex.
Don't know if I've ever seen it dubbed, but...
He's Sessamaru in Inuyasha.
Ah!
He's a voice in Beetle Adventure Racing, a game that I don't think anyone else has played. He was in Reboot, if you remember Reboot.
I do remember Reboot, yes.
He has stood up in the X-Files previously. He was in Firewalker and Apocrypha.
Okay.
He was in the old dub of Ranma Half as Tendo.
Okay, yeah.
And maintained it all the way through. And he was in Sliders. Like, what on earth?
I'm tickled by the fact he's Ford Cruella.
I know. It's guys, what? Just a few other voices, but it was like, Ford Cruella, really?
Mm.
Is that the same guy? Yes, it is. Mark Gibbon played First Guard, who's, I can't remember, he might be at the building at the start. My Little Pony Friendship is Magic.
Okay. Keeps coming up, doesn't it?
It does. He played someone called Heart Heart. I've no idea who that was, but...
Not sure.
He was also in Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex as Boma.
Okay, yeah.
What on earth is happening here? And was previously in the X-Files in Paper Hearts.
Ah.
Steve Macaj played ND Man. I cannot figure out who that is. He was in Heart Realm. And previously played Scott Ostelhoff in the previous episode of the X-Files.
Okay.
He's also in Millennium. And he is the future architect's father in It. Haystack. He's
Haystack's father.
in It.
Is that the new It or old It?
The old It.
Right.
You see the vision of him standing outside the water treatment plant.
Yeah.
That's him.
Oh, okay.
DJ Jackson is played the Demo Man, who was in Slither, Dead Like Me, Millennium, and the Doctor Who movie, as in the pilot.
The Paul McGann one.
The Paul McGann American pilot. And last, kind of not least, is Brenda James as a publicist, who is also in Slither.
Well, it's a good film. Anyhow, do you have a synopsis for this one?
I do. I mean, we're trying to take this from the X-Files wiki because Wikipedia has very scant synopsises for this.
I was just planning to make mine up as I went along.
That's fair. So, the Lone Gunmen attempt to steal an Octium 4 chip during a conference at the headquarters of the EcomCon Computer Corp in Vienna, Virginia. While Langley causes a distraction by posing as a heckling attendee who then passes out, Byers lowers Frohickey into a highly secured room which contains a chip. However, a bearded man enters the room, kisses Frohickey, and takes the chip before the Lone Gunmen can abscond with it. The bearded man then enters the men's room, discards their disguise, and emerges as an attractive young woman, who we'll later discover is Eves Adel Harlow. The Lone Gunmen return home, disappointed in the failure of their operation. Byers is not only frustrated they have failed to obtain the proof they were seeking, but he also bemoans the lack of influence the group's newspaper has had ever since they started publishing it. Frohickey confirms the robber was Eves Adel Harlow, of whom Langley has only heard rumours. They find a listening device that Harlow used to learn of their plans before Byers receives a phone call confirming that his father is dead. They attend the funeral of Byers' father, Bertram Roosevelt Byers, an aerospace engineer. Frohickey is impressed by the amount of military brass, and following a eulogy by Ray Helm, Byers launches a rocket in memory of his father. While walking to the graveyard, Frohickey tells Langley about how Byers lost contact with his father when they started the Lone Gunmen paper. When Byers joins the other two, he is then approached by Ray Helm, who introduced himself as a co-worker of Byers' father and wants to talk about his father's death, implying there's more to the incident than has been reported. He shows the Lone Gunmen to the area where Byers' father crashed, beneath one end of a bridge in Reston, Virginia. Apparently, the police have ruled the crash an accident caused by the driver falling asleep at the wheel based on the lack of skid marks in the area. Langley realizes that Helm's theory differs. Byers initially thinks that Helm is suggesting his father committed suicide, until Helm clarifies that he believes Bertram Byers was murdered. Helm has no proof to back up his claims, but states the outcome would be the desire in cases of government-sanctioned murder. In response to Byers' puzzlement over why his father specifically was targeted, Ray Helm states that the government may have had a problem with Bertram being a conscionable man, and recalls that Bertram had been upset about something unspecified when he last talked to him. The three find fault with Helm's story due to the fact the government employee himself, but Helms claims he believes that if Byers was anything like his father, he would want to know the truth. The Lone Gunmen go to Bertram Byers' property and search. Frohickey slips over on the carpet and begins to check for blood, and finds it shortly, while Byers and Langley find that the computer has been wiped and reformatted, leaving only a scant reference to something called Scenario 12D. Byers concludes that, in contradiction to what they were told, his father was killed long before the crash and murdered at home. At the ABC salvage yard, Byers explains to a slightly confused Frohickey there must be evidence in the wreckage of the crashed car that was not destroyed in the vehicle's explosion. Meanwhile, Langley tracks down Kimmy Belmont, a fellow hacker who Langley asks for help with circumventing the Defense Department's online security codes. Kimmy is reluctant to help, however, busy with shooting simulation and suspecting that Langley is investigating yet another conspiracy, such as those regarding the Kennedy assassination. Kimmy advises Langley that as a skilled hacker he should be enjoying success, but their discussion is interrupted by a noisy gunfire from another simulation, a silhouetted long-haired woman who's using two guns simultaneously. Initially impressed, Langley learns that this is Eves Adel Harlow, so Langley confronts her. She mockingly insults Langley and his group, but Kimmy persuades Langley to leave her to the simulation while they exit to do some hacking. Frohickey is working on the wrecked car and voices his frustration to an observant Byers regarding the search of the wreckage. While searching the car, Frohickey finds a circuit board from within the wreckage, and while showing it to Langley and Kimmy back at the Lone Gunmen office, they discover that it could be used to remotely control the speed of a car. Kimmy successfully enters the Department of Defense's security network, and this draws attention, and they learn that Scenario 12D concerns airline terrorism. Byers insists that Kimmy downloads a file about Scenario 12D, but the hacker's intrusion is remotely detected by two men in a small room. Even though Kimmy continues to download the document, while he and Langley express their anxiety over being tracked down, Frohickey eventually pulls the plug before the intruder's address could be determined. One of the two men tracking the intruders is actually Ray Helm. In the Lone Gunmen offices, Langley suggests to Frohickey that they resign for the night, but Frohickey remarks that it is already morning. A depressed Byers considers the blood the trio found in his father's residence, eventually coming to the realization that the blood may not have been his father's. Later, the Lone Gunmen exit their van at the same site where Ray Helm suggested Bertram Byers may have been murdered. They examine the vehicle tracks on the ground and discuss with Ray Helm about the computer chip they found, and explains that the group now believes his father's not actually dead, and begin to recount that the blood found in his father's living room had actually been from his father's potential killer. As Byers and Frohickey continue to explain the bloody carpet had been freshly shampooed to erase the blood evidence, a male assassin creeps up behind Bertram Byers while he's watching TV and trips and falls and shoots himself. Ray Helm is skeptical of the unprofessional quality of the assassin, but Langley reminds Helm that the killer had been a government contractor. Bert subsequently goes to his car and finds the remote control the assassin had attached to it. Byers speculates that someone had gone to great lengths to make it look like to fake his father's death in a car accident and murder his father without suspicion. Byers then turns the table and puts the dead assassin inside his own car and uses the remote control to drive the vehicle into a bridge spot at great speed, causing a fiery explosion. Byers tells Ray Helm that the attempt on his father's life was part of the effort to hide Scenario 12D. The other two gunmen, despite Helm's eagerness to find Byers, are more interested in learning what Scenario 12D is. They ask for his help and password, which Helms admits is Overlord. Although Byers is pleased that Helms seems willing to assist, Byers is still clearly depressed and walks away from the others. His carelessness confuses Langley, but Froki explains that Byers is troubled he may never see his father again. Byers goes back to his father's home where he finds a stack of Lone Gunmen newspapers. His father then enters the room and Byers is pleased to be reunited. However, Bertram is angry and slaps his son, angered that his son has derailed his attempt to fake his own death. Byers asks about Scenario 12D, and his father reluctantly admits that the same men who developed it now intend to act out the scenario, planning to commit a terrorist act against a domestic airline. The elaborate plan is to crash a fully loaded 727 in the middle of New York, which will influence dictators around the world to contend that they are responsible for the crash, thereby introducing some enemies for the US to stockpile against and increase the country's arms sales. Byers is shocked to hear of this scheme and learns from his father that the crash is scheduled for later that night. Byers suggests the group's newspaper might have exposed the plot if his father had come to them earlier. His father ridicules the notion and insults the publication. Bertram and Byers get on a plane, the targeted plane, that will be going to New York, and while being watched by a man via telephone who reports to Ray Helm that the two of them will be on the plane. Neither Bertram nor Byers can find any evidence of a bomb on board the plane. While conversing with his father, Byers suddenly comes to the conclusion that Overlord instead plans to crash the aircraft using the remote control that was used to crash his car. Byers contacts the two Lone Gunmen and notifies them of the conclusion and instructs Langley to do some hacking to determine the plane's course. Langley and Froki work in tandem to access readouts from the plane, discovering that someone is indeed flying the aircraft from the ground. Meanwhile, Langley and Froki continue their call and report the aircraft is on a collision course with the World Trade Center and is due to come to an abrupt end in 22 minutes. Byers relays this news to his father and informs the flight crew who attempt to wrest control of the plane and fail to do so. Frustrated, Langley finds that disrupting the flight control system will take days and tells his two publishing partners of the problem. Froki implies he has another plan and heads away. At the shooting range, Eves is finishing a round when Froki approaches her. Froki appeals to Eves for the chip she stole earlier and threatens that if she does not hand it over, he will release a secret that her alias is an anagram of Lee Harvey Oswald. Langley keeps trying to disrupt the flight control system, but his efforts are in vain and the plane's crash seems certain until at the very last moment. His attempts are successful. He is only remotely being helped by Froki and Eves utilizing the Octium 4 chip. The plane takes a steep attempt and glides over the rooftops of the World Trade Center, narrowly avoiding disaster. A short time later, Byers and his father disembark from the now landed plane. The continuance of his journey to Boston having been cancelled. Byers is adamant they stop Overlord by publicly releasing information about the operation. Bertram Byers tells his son that though they are very alike, the younger Byers has a braveness the older man does not have, and in an implied admittance his father plans to not take further action against Overlord due to the danger that they pose on his life. Bertram admits he knows his son is fighting for the American dream, but advises John he shouldn't expect to win. Later, the Lone Gunmen plan the next cover story to be about the verted terrorist plot, but Byers disagrees that they should publish the story as they have insufficient proof. Instead, Froki suggests they write their forthcoming cover story about the Octium 4 chip, revealing that he receives the chip from Eves. The two gunmen, pleased to be in possession of such an incriminated evidence, agree on writing about it.
Thank you.
It's a good pilot.
It is a good pilot, yes.
I don't have much... No, I don't actually have much complaint about how it's handled. I mean, there are some weirdo bits and pieces. I mean, do we want to start with Eves or should we build up to Eves?
It's your rodeo.
It's our rodeo. I keep going over this. I think I alluded to, I can't remember if I kept it in or not, but I alluded to it before that I feel that she is she's basically there to convince the 18 to 30 crowd to tune into this series if they didn't like the X-Files or they were watching the X-Files for Scully, or she's there as eye candy.
It was something attributed to early Scully years. Although Scully became a kind of feminist icon in the X-Files, she was originally just in there for eye candy. They needed a pretty young woman in the cast.
Yes, and there was a story about how Chris Carter had to fight for her rather than a blonde, leggy woman who was taller than Dave Duchovny.
Yeah. In the same time, we've kind of got that here in the fact that you've got 3 geeks who are not conventionally attractive. So we've stuffed a very leggy hacker, although we don't really see her doing much hacking in the course of the episode, as their kind of femme fatale foil.
with leather pants. Let's not forget the tight leather pants.
Interestingly, the actress herself was somewhat nervous because the first scene she filmed was the first scene that we saw, with her kissing the upside-down frohiki while she was dressed as a man. And this scene made her very bashful and awkward, and Tom Braidwood felt terrible about it that this was her first experience on the set.
Yeah, not a good introduction.
But interestingly, the outfit that made her look like a man that she commented was hideously ugly, she wanted to test its efficiency, so she went outside and started hitting on women, and she said they all basically just recoiled from her and looked at her in abject horror, which gives an impression of just how unappealing the man makeup with the beard and the short hair that she had on was.
Fair enough. But I do remember when the series came out and they sort of said they've got this new character, Eves. It was the whole... It's one of these things where I'm not a network executive, but then again, I don't believe that most network executives actually do understand what they're doing anyway. I didn't see the need for her when you've already got this close-knit trio, other than to convince people to watch the series.
They needed a foil for them. Obviously, you need some kind of nemesis, like you have the Cancer Man and Kryjak and stuff like that in the X-Files. It doesn't need to be the kind of femme fatale sort of character.
No.
Other than the fact is, we're blatantly trying to make this series a bit like Mission Impossible, so we had spy thriller on the brain, I think.
Yeah, the odd thing, I think, is that Eve stops being that almost immediately. But we'll get to that in a minute. Mission Impossible is interesting, though. Didn't Mission Impossible or the Tom Cruise one come out in 1994?
Yeah, it would have been around then.
Yeah. And yet we're doing a very close spoof of The Wire stuff from the middle of Mission Impossible when they lower him into that sealed room with the sound levels. It feels a really old reference to make.
It's also more cinematic than anything you've seen the Lone Gunmen do before, where we've previously seen them things like in electrical tunnels, hacking directly outside buildings and things like that.
Yeah, it feels odd to... And also, you can't help but say... Yeah, they put Frohiki on a wire because they think that's going to be funnier than if it was Langley or Byers.
Yeah.
And that's not good either.
I did quite like Langley's diversion, though. I do think that Dean Haglund has the best comic timing of any of them.
Yeah, well, you told me he was a comedian.
He is a comedian, yeah.
So yeah, that does make sense.
But his whole diversion when it goes kind of awry and he suddenly pretends to have a peanut allergy and just drops.
Yeah.
It's actually hilarious.
Oh yeah, I like all that. And
there was a comment from Rob Bowman on set that he discovered that if he tells them to act out any scene as seriously as possible, the three guys somehow make it funnier than if they try to act comedic.
Yeah, well, I can see that being somewhat like how Police Squad and The Naked Gun were done. Is an airplane as well. You've just got to have the really silly situations, and if you have people doing it as straight-faced as possible, the absurdity of it kicks in and it gets funnier and funnier. So I can see why they were trying to do that, and that would have been a good way to operate it. But I think, as we said, it's like, as a pilot episode, it's pretty good. It's fine. It's a government conspiracy. This is the Lone Gunmen's wheelhouse in a way they haven't done for a while. I've been complaining about that. They're publishing... It's no longer the Silver Bullet or the Magic Bullet. It's now the Lone Gunmen newspaper, which always feels slightly odd choice.
It was the Magic Bullet previously.
The Magic Bullet. But yeah, they renamed it to the Lone Gunmen a while back, because I think we didn't actually notice when they did it. On the other hand, they do seem to be printing rubbish, which seems to be consistent with Dreamland.
Yeah.
Because that thing about Teletubbies and mind control, and it's that's just ruining your credibility.
It is the kind of thing that is a bit like a government conspiracy, though.
It is.
I mean, isn't that the plot of, like, Blood, for example? Government mind control activated by a digital device.
Yeah. I mean, they should have published something on Blood. I mean, where did they write an issue on Blood? I think we need to know. Or Wet Wired.
But you're right. This is more their wheelhouse, as you say, in the fact that they're supposed to be about government conspiracies and corporate espionage and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and so they're doing it right from the off. They've got installed in the ship. I do have to question, it's the actual breaking into a place and stealing a processor like that feels a bit far for them, because that doesn't... I mean, Mulder has got them to do field ops in the past, but you get the impression that while they have the skills to do it, that's not their thing normally.
The field ops as well that we've seen, they're usually running interference while Mulder does the heavy lifting.
Exactly. And now they've got Frohiki doing the point man stuff, which feels odd. Computer geekery bit as well, though, is they've stolen this brand new computer chip.
Mm.
One thing, if you don't know about computers, is that while chips are theoretically interchangeable, in certain terms of hardware revisions, you put the wrong chip into the wrong motherboard, it doesn't do anything.
Okay.
So the fact they can just put this chip they've stolen, this unreleased new to market chip, and put it into all these other motherboards, kind of strange credibility, but you can leave that one off.
There was quite a lot of technobabble in the episode, to be fair.
Some of it was very strange.
It means nothing to me. I like the fact they kept using the word megaflop. I don't know if a megaflop is a thing, but I like the word.
Flops are a measurement of processing power, but you're talking really not desktop stuff.
Well, there were definitely megaflops there. They used the word about 9 times in a sentence.
They did like their megaflops. I did like how, despite the whole trying to do things seriously and generally being Mission Impossible spy thriller, there were moments of levity and they kind of worked. Like the assassin slipping on the carpet, I thought was great.
Oh, when he shoots himself.
Yeah, just all sneaking up and just whoosh, straight over.
I also like the little kind of, flashback or explanation in Bayer's head of his dad discovering the remote control in his car and just making it go backwards and forwards a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the Lone Gunmen do have an air of silliness in the series. Or at least the three of kind of unusual suspects, there's definitely a comic edge to both of those episodes, and it makes sense to keep playing into that.
On the subject of comic edge, do you know what the most complicated stunt was in the entirety of this episode?
Is it the guy slipping over? Oh, wait, no, I think I saw this. It's Frohike falling into the mud.
It is indeed. Was the most complex and time-consuming stunt in the episode, and you never think it.
No, and I just skimmed over. Do you want to explain why that was complicated?
It's because they actually did film it in a proper breaker's yard. And in breakers' yards, the soil tends to be highly toxic because you've had all these kind of rust and chemical runoffs and gasoline running into the soil. So they did actually have to excavate a chunk of the yard to quite far down and refill it with kind of loam and clay to make a safe area that someone could fall into without potentially poisoning themselves doing so. But also it was meant to be a stuntman doing that, but Rob Bowman was kind of very keen that Tom Braidwood did the stunt himself. And Tom Braidwood just said, all right, I'll give it one take. If it doesn't look good, I'm not doing it again. And luckily they got that hilarious kind of pratfall on one take that just cracked up the entire crew filming it, so they stuck with it.
I think it's fair as well. It's a good fall.
Mm.
It works. And I think that's the overriding sort of feel of coming away from the pilot again, is it all works. Eves is not a good actress, or she's not well directed. I'm not sure, because it's difficult to say sometimes.
I've never seen her in anything else, so I don't want to say she's a bad actress.
She has done other things, but not Winslow.
It could be that she's not right for this role, or she's not being directed correctly, or very well written. Yeah, there's a plethora of things. It might not be her.
It might not be her. I did realise it's interesting they've got that virtual shootout thing at the start that they find Kimmy and Eve's at.
Yeah. And
it's like, it's one of those continuity things of, do you know when I mentioned first person shooter and how you invested in this and it fell apart?
Yeah, true.
And not this per se, but something similar to this.
I couldn't decide if it was virtual though as well, because her Uzis look pretty real. She's got the eye protection on, there's a muzzle flare.
On ear protection as well. It's kind of weird, isn't it?
Mm.
But the stuff you saw Kimmy shooting definitely was virtual, wasn't it? So I don't know either. It's weird. But yeah. I know in the synopsis it does say as well that Frohike threatens to reveal her name is an anagram of Lee Harvey Oswald. I don't know what that does to her.
He infers he knows her real name, though.
He does, and that's what I thought it was, but that's not what the synopsis said. But I thought, if he knows her real name, that makes more sense as a threat.
Yeah.
Because they're implied to have a history that she doesn't have with the other two.
From the kiss, she knows who he is.
Yeah. But it's just the way he talks to her as well. There's a sense of an existing history.
Yeah. I didn't think they went far enough with Langley's relationship with her either, because Langley, is dangerously asexual, and his relationship with Eve is he sees her as the enemy now, and he wants her to be punished, basically. Yes. But that kind of tails off about halfway through the episode.
Yeah, and it's odd the blackmail to get her to help out with the computer hack as well. It's she's meant to be. It feels like they want to make it really cold and mercenary, and they haven't actually stuck that properly because she doesn't give off mercenary in the way I think she's meant to.
True.
Because it should be. I know she's sort of not wanting to help he prevent a aircraft going into the World Trade Center. And we'll talk about that in a minute, because it's still an incredible coincidence.
Yeah, the closest thing I can think of with Eve is she makes me think of Fujiko Mine from Lupin the Third.
I can get that, but...
The only small difference is she doesn't have that kind of sexual relationship with the protagonist.
Yeah, and Fujiko Mine has been around for a long time, and there's so many different variations of her character, which of course led to the woman called Fujiko Mine, which was a wild, different way of doing her.
It's a really good anime.
It is a really good anime, yes.
But if you haven't heard, Lupin the Third is a tremendously old manga and anime series. There have been lots of different adaptations of it. The Hayao Miyazaki movie, The Castle of Cagliostro, is probably the most famous one in the West, which is often mistakenly called a Studio Ghibli movie, but it isn't.
It predates it.
It predates Ghibli, doesn't it? Yeah. But in this series, Lupin the Third is a master criminal and descendant of Arsène Lupin, and his kind of femme fatale foil is called Fujiko Mine, who starts off as just being a damsel in distress sort of character and rapidly becomes this kind of feminist icon.
Yeah, although you have to get off series 1 really for her to start getting into that.
Yeah.
But she's astonishingly sexually liberated, we might say.
Yeah.
No qualms about anything. Will get naked at the drop of a hat if it helps her out.
But yeah, it's worth a look in if you're into kind of spy thrillers and stuff. Lupin's tremendously fun.
It is, and that's an interesting contrast to Eve's, and I can see it being they wanted someone like her, but there's limitations, so you can't go as far as that, especially on network TV. There's hard limits, you can't go that that whole hog. So one of the elephant in the room, when we had the content warning at the start, obviously, is that this episode broadcast on the 4th of March 2001. 5 months later, what they depicted in fiction would happen in reality, with a much worse consequence.
Kind of scary in hindsight. Apparently, the writing room floor for this went on the basis of, in Mulder and Scully, they try and think of global threats that can be supernatural. They wanted a kind of global conspiracy that would not be supernatural. So they hit on this idea of the US government orchestrating terrorist attacks on their own soil to start an arms race. And just by sheer random crazy happenstance, the worst thing they could think of was the US government hijacking a plane and flying it into the World Trade Center while making it look like a terrorist strike. Unfortunately, then 6 months later...
It actually happened.
Well, not actually happened, it wasn't...
Well, no, but it's similar enough. Well, I was going to say, that's where it gets muddy, because after 9/11, there came the idea of the 9/11 truthers, the people who did insist it was the government who actually did the whole thing.
Of course.
And you hate to say it, but it's like, was that did that actually occur to someone, or did this originate from people who'd watched Lone Gunmen? You know, watched it when it came out, dismissed it, then it actually happened, and that kernel of an idea is already in their head.
Yeah.
We don't know. I mean, I imagine people have looked into this to the amount that you can, but we did talk about a bit in terms of conspiracy theories, and we've alluded to it a few times that we're going to come back to it in season 11, because season 11 is going to really do a number on how conspiratorial thinking works. But it's curious, like, this is when Lone Gunmen was made, conspiracies were still kind of fun. Like, people had all these strange notions about the government, and it was an amusing diversion.
Like the man on the grassy knoll.
Yeah. And unfortunately, in 2024, the conspiracy theory people are actually terrifying, and we want them to stop.
I think it's the fact that they have... It's in part due to the social media's rise and things like that. They have so much power now. This isn't the kind of crackpots shouting about this in very small spaces to a very small audience.
Yes, it can be amplified very fast and very wide in a way it couldn't in the past. Like, the Lone Gunmen newspaper, I mean, Jimmy, the next episode touch on it a bit more, but they have a tiny circulation. They make a big thing of how few subscribers they have.
So it's something like 2,000 subscribers or something.
Yeah, and that's also kind of odd, because the element of them struggling as an organisation has never come up before now.
No.
We're 8 seasons on, they've never been any kind of hint of financial trouble for them at all.
You do get the idea that they're not wildly successful, given that they are 3 men who essentially live in their printing room.
Yeah, but you also got the impression that basically they were independently wealthy, which they have to be for First Person Shooter to make any sense.
Yeah.
And you can make the case that First Person Shooter has bankrupted them. You still then have to struggle with, where does that money come from? Because if Bertram hasn't talked to buyers since he started the Lone Gunmen newspaper, which we saw, The other two were at a kind of rundown convention selling satellite hacking tools.
Yeah.
How they've actually fund their lives is really questionable, and we just don't think about it. And this episode has brought our attention to it. And yeah, how do you not survive? I don't
Langley
understand.
was the secret millionaire the entire time.
I can believe that. Or Frohickey was.
Langley's kung fu is best.
Langley's Kung Fu is best. Well, I mean, that's going to come up in a minute as well. As a pilot, it's an encouraging pilot because it's the whole, you've spun them off. This is in their wheelhouse. It's that kind of conspiracy they're looking at. The characters are well established already. They sort of all know their roles. They don't need any warm up, and the only kind of new element, which is Eves, who is an outsider to them. So that kind of strange relationship also makes sense. It all fits together well enough.
And it's pretty compelling. I think, as you touched on earlier, it balances action and humour very well. The tone's maybe not always quite what we've seen for the Lone Gunmen before because we've tried to Hollywoodify it a bit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I really enjoyed it.
Yes, and I think Rob Bowman, despite Rob Bowman's previous troubling statements in a few episodes, mentioning no names,
Yeah.
is the right kind of person to do this as a big opener because it's got the cinematic feel.
Interestingly, apparently Rob Bowman doesn't normally let writers watch when he directs things, but he made an exception for this. John Shiban sat with him while he was doing it to help him moderate tone and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I wonder if that also helped kind of sharpen it for the first episode.
It might well have been. Well, that's cool.
Mm.
But do we have anything else for pilot, or are we going to have to talk about someone else?
No, I think we'll move on to a certain familiarly named new character.
So, the first proper episode of The Lone Gunmen is called Bond, Jimmy Bond. Written by Brian Spicer, written by Vince Gilligan, John Shaban, and Frank Spotnitz. So that's John Gilnitz to the head again. First broadcast on the 11th of March 2001. Another new core cast member enters, which would be Stephen Seddon, who you've seen in one other thing.
Oh, have I?
Better Call Saul.
Oh, really? Who's he in Saul?
No one I recognise the name of again, unfortunately, but he's somewhere in Better Call Saul. But we have some other guest cast, and there's some weird conversions. So there's Alexander Colin, who played Russian guy.
Good.
Yep. Who's in Final Destination 3.
Okay.
There's Christina Jasumsky, who played Mrs. Goldsmith. She was in Warcraft.
Okay.
As a high mage.
Okay.
Final Destination 2.
We've just swept the Final Destination cast for this?
Yep, Millennium. But one we've seen before would be Hiro Kanagawa, who played the businessman. So he was in Star Trek Next Generation. 50 Shades Freed.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. He was, of course, in Synchrony, but he was also in Firewalker.
He is. He's the technician that dies towards the start.
And he'll show up again in the future, in Season 10.
Okay.
We're getting him back again. As another character. He was in the 2014 version of Godzilla.
Okay.
Josie and the Pussycats.
Ah.
And Millennium. So would you like to tell us about Jimmy Bond with Zing?
I'll do my best. Our episode opens this time in a stylized Japanese room, where a Japanese businessman is tied to a chair being interrogated by a thug who claims that he has kidnapped him from his home in Maryland and taken him to Osaka. The guy tied to the chair appears to be involved in a whaling organisation in some way, while the thug is potentially an eco-terrorist trying to find out the location of his fleet. When things start to come to a head, luckily for the tied-up businessman, Frohickey appears, wearing a full martial arts outfit and takes out the eco-terrorists with his impressive kung fu. Things start to go wrong as Frohickey and the now freed businessman try to escape, when the businessman discovers that Frohickey is on a wire and speaking through a translation program built into a pallet that he's wearing. As the room falls down around them, he realises it's a set, and it was indeed the eco-terrorist, who is actually the employer of the Lone Gunmen, trying to discover the location of this whaling fleet in Yokohama. A brief fight scene ensues, in which both Frohickey and the businessman manage to beat each other up. We cut then to a scene in which a young man plays golf from a rooftop while crying. An assassin enters through the house behind him and shoots him, after declaring 4. After these two seemingly unconnected sequences, we cut to the Lone Gunmen in their office, where we learn that they are running dangerously low on funds, and indeed their latest copies of the Lone Gunmen are waiting on the docks because they have no money left to publish them, so therefore can't claim the shipment. Langley's answer to their financial problems is to add a page in their paper every week called the Lone Gunwoman of the Week, selling more with tits and ass. The other two, of course, shoot this down. Eves arrives at their premises to tell them of something they may be interested in. A famous hacker known as Double Bogey, or DB, has been killed. It's been reported that this was a drug deal gone bad, however, the ammo used to kill him was one commonly used by intelligence agencies around the world. As he's one of the best hackers in the world, this does look particularly suspect. The Lone Gunmen head to Staten Island to meet with Mrs. Goldsmith, mother of Double Bogey, whose real name is Alex Goldsmith. On the way, they run out of gas, and Langley is forced to siphon this, however he does so wrong and makes himself ill in the process. While investigating Alex's computer at his house, Langley gets ill and throws up inside Alex's prize golf bag, his most important possession, which has been signed by many different famous golfers. In trying to clean this up, he manages to wash off all the signatures, forcing them to have to painstakingly rewrite them back on. However, in rewriting things on the golf bag, Byers discovers a check folded up in the pocket. It's from a charity called the Philanthropic Outreach Enterprises, or POE Corporation, and it's made out to Alex Goldsmith for the value of $1 million. They have to question exactly what he has done for a supposed charity to get such a big payout. On investigating POE Corporation, they discover it has also made payments to a man called James Bond, and they have become immediately suspicious that this is an alias. However, on investigating James Bond, they discover that Jimmy Bond is actually a real person. He has also been having anonymous donations from this supposed charity, which he's been using to fund his dream of a blind American football team, who operate through use of bleeping balls and sonar helmets. While investigating Jimmy, Langley strikes off on his own to try and figure out more about the POE Corporation. He breaks into their office and proves that he is just as good a hacker as Goldsmith to try and get them to hire him. The organisation do indeed hire him by tying him up and throwing him into the trunk of their car, driving him away to what turns out to be the Belamisk Embassy. This is a small breakaway embassy from a former USSR faction. With the help of Eves, Byers and Frohike investigate exactly what the Belamisk Embassy are doing with POE. It turns out it is a shell corporation designed to hide illegal arms deals. They need a hacker somehow to complete this deal. It turns out, through conversation with Langley, is they need this hacker to embezzle the funds required for this. They also reveal to Jimmy that he's been kind of named up as a fall guy, so if anything goes south, people will come for him rather than the Belamisk Embassy. Jimmy immediately marches into the Belamisk Embassy to tell him he knows what's going on. He is, of course, quickly apprehended and captured by the assassin we saw at the start of the episode killing Alex. This all turned out to be part of the gunman's plan. Jimmy was designed to be captured to get access to Langley in order to provide him with a ghost modem circuit. Using this, Langley manages to complete the transaction, what the Belamisk agency wants. However, Eve, hacking on the other side, actually steals the $50 million they are after. Just before the assassins can finish their deal by assassinating Langley, as was previously their plan, with Jimmy's help, Langley manages to escape the embassy and runs away. However, Eves escapes with the $50 million that she has hacked away from their funds, leaving the Belamisk embassy with nothing. With all that remains in the gunman's hands as the $1 million check, Langley chooses to give it back to Mrs. Goldsmith, in part to apologise for the mess he made of their house, but also because he knows deep down it's the right thing to do. As the trio lament the fact that they still have no money to publish their paper, they get back to their office to find the stacks of papers waiting for them. Jimmy is paid to release them because he's realised that they're helping to fight the lost causes, and he wants to be part of that.
Thank you.
Thanks. I hope I did okay there. Trying to do this without the help of Wikipedia is harder than I remembered.
Yes. Okay, so first up, I'd like to hear the explanation for why Jimmy is here before I get on to all the problems I have with him.
Jimmy is here for me.
For you? Oh, okay. So bias isn't enough.
No, not that reason at all.
Okay.
For all the times I have made you explain techno-babble to me on the show,
Oh,
Jimmy is here because they were
right.
worried that there is a lot of techno-babble between three people who all know what each other is talking about, so therefore don't need to explain it to each other. So therefore they need a Kim on the party, the idiot who will say, "What the hell are you talking about, guys?" that they have to explain to in layman terms.
Okay.
So no, he's not eye candy. Byers is enough for us.
Is he?
He's here for the idiots amongst us like me who have no idea what they're talking about and just hear the word megaflops 9 times in a sentence.
I thought Frohickey was there for you.
I love Frohickey so much.
I know you do. Okay, so what gets me about this is if we didn't have an intro sequence, because we now have an intro sequence for Lone Gunmen.
It's very Mission Impossible.
It is very much possible. If Jimmy wasn't in that intro sequence, you would have thought he was a one-off character, and I'm pretty sure he was going to be at some point.
He actually wasn't.
Okay.
He was written in, he knew he was going to be a mainstay of the series, but most of the crew and cast thought the same as you.
Yeah.
So he said he was constantly being congratulated by people on the set as though he was never coming back, saying, "Oh, you did such a great job," and all the rest of it. And he just knew that he'd be back next week to film the next episode.
That's really bad communication then internally.
Yeah.
The other thing that got me, and I'm surprised I was thinking about this in terms of writing capacity, is Jimmy has a fundamental flaw to his character now, though.
Yeah.
So, I was thinking about this in terms of the X-Files as well. So you've set up Mulder, and Mulder has an ongoing quest.
Yeah.
But it's depending where you cut it, it's either reveal the existence of the supernatural, find his sister, explain his sister, stop the aliens, etc., etc. Mulder has a thing he wants to do. Scully, and this is very kind of indicative of 90s writing, doesn't, but hers is tied into Mulder. So her reason for being here relies heavily on Mulder doing what he's doing, as much as there is a slow transition from not believing into believing as it goes on. We have Lone Gunmen. Lone Gunmen are all about exposing conspiracies and ne'er-do-wells within the government. Well, at least that's how we thought they worked.
They fight the good fight.
They've had the good fight. Fighting the good fight is a new one. It used to be uncovering conspiracies. So, then, see, and the pilot did kind of touch on that. That's fine. Eves, as far as we can tell, is a mercenary and in it for the money. Jimmy's dream was to run a blind football league.
It's a cute dream.
It's a cute dream. That dream is now over. What is he doing? What is he here for? Other than to explain technical babble to, because I understand that bit. His character as depicted has no future now.
You're bearing in mind you're ignoring his monologue halfway through the episode.
Oh, I know.
Yes, his dream was to run this blind football league, and I have a plethora of problems I would like to get started with that. However, he has a monologue halfway through of the fact he does it because he wants to be there for the underdog, and he wants to believe in these people that people have written off and told they can't do things. Which is why he kind of becomes so attached to the Lone Gunmen throughout the episode, as these guys are the underdog that are fighting to expose things bigger than they are. So yeah, you can see how his kind of... It hasn't even evolved, really. It's a continuation of his same goals to help people in need.
It's fair. However, I think the problem is, though, that he's not there for that reason, though. He's there to explain techno-babble.
Yeah, he is.
If he was there as a champion of underdogs, because I think you actually suggested that at one point you could see he's basically their mystery benefactor. He'll show up once or twice. Like Charlie's Angels, he can be Charlie.
Yeah,
at the end of a phone.
I can see that. Of course, we learn in this episode that Jimmy doesn't have real money. He's been gifted money as this patsy. If Jimmy was the financial backer, he was the rich... I can't think of the word in America. He's one of the 1%. He's the inheritance baby.
Capitalist.
The venture capitalist or something like that. He could just fund them behind the scenes, and occasionally maybe they'll be drawn into plots because they'll have to do something to keep their benefactor happy.
Yeah.
Or something.
And that's the kind of thing where that kind of role for Jimmy Bond would be okay. Wouldn't be too bad.
The other thing I could envision doing with the character, a way I could think of writing in someone like him to the series is I'd cast him like Brett in Inside Job. So Brett is introduced initially as an annoyance character. The main character in Inside Job is called Reagan. Reagan is a scientist in an underground government agency, so fits in with the X-Files.
Yeah.
Who is incredibly intelligent, very scientifically minded, but has no interpersonal skills. So she goes in the first episode for a promotion to be like their team leader. She kind of gets it, but the role is split with another man who she considers an idiot because he's like a frat boy. He's very charismatic and personable, but knows nothing.
Yeah.
But she realises throughout the course of the series that the two of them working together are a successful team because each of them make up for the other's weaknesses. I can imagine Jimmy as a Brett. So you've got the fact that you've got these three highly capable, intelligent geeks with very little social awareness, and you've got their front man.
Yeah, you've just made me realise the other aspect then. We've been talking about this in terms of Mission Impossible, but another one, and one I think they were alluding to cryptically, was the A-Team.
Okay.
I don't remember the A-Team very well. I just used to watch the A-Team, but it's very foggy and other people seem to have much better memories of it. But is it something like Murdoch is the face man?
I've never actually watched it,
Okay.
and I shouldn't admit to that really, but
Well, it doesn't really matter too much because,
I only know about B.A. Baracus.
you know, B.A. Baracus and also the whole, they're usually locked in a tool shed and then they do something to the van and the van becomes a tank.
Yeah.
This is the A-Team plot. But it's looking at Lone Gunmen again. It's a case of they've got a VW van Beetle that they use to transport them around, which hasn't existed prior to this. This is new for the Lone Gunmen series.
Okay.
Because they don't
No,
generally
I
drive around.
don't think they've ever had
They have to have had a van, but you don't see it.
It's a old-style Volkswagen Transporter, isn't
Yeah.
it?
But then what you're saying though is like you've got Jimmy being the equivalent of this guy, the guy who has to go and impersonate people, because the A-Team were a group of mercenaries. You need the good-looking guy to go out in front to distract people or sort of maintain different roles and things. Again, it goes back to Mission Impossible to a certain degree. So I can see that as well. That would help the Lone Gunmen, but I think one of the problems is I think it's part of it is that division between the pilot and Jimmy Bond.
Yeah.
Is as much as they can sort of say they knew he was going to be a mainstay of the series going on, he was not in the calculus for episode 1. He wasn't meant to exist at this point in time.
No. I get the impression often you get feedback after a pilot episode.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the feedback was there was too much technobabble, and
Yeah.
Jimmy's come in to help remedy this.
And again, I can also say that I know you like bios. It's a case of people saying the girls need someone as well.
I don't get the girls need someone because it's not like you've given them a bad boy or some other kind of romantic archetype. He's still a nice guy, as is Byers, and Byers is cute as. I've seen through people on Twitter as a lot of people are very fond of Byers. It's not just me. But he's a good-looking guy. He's polite. He's well-mannered. He's affable. You could introduce him to your parents quite easily. What's wrong with Byers, really?
I don't have a problem with Byers at all, but I can't help but this is two birds with one stone kind of thing. I do also want to say I think his name is a mistake. I understand why it's included as a joke, but really, in a spy kind of thriller, this is a poor joke to make.
I guess it's no worse than having John Doe in Seven.
True. And I suppose you can make the same thing about Eves with her ridiculous pseudonym.
What is her full name? It's Eves.
Adele Harlow.
Eves Adele Harlow.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, it doesn't even sound like a real name.
No. And it's still very odd that Fariki managed to interpret that. I mean, I looked up her real name because it comes up in the summary of Jump the Shark.
I think she's named in Jump the Shark if she's not before.
Yeah, and I looked at it a few times and went, what? Why? I can understand why they've added him in. I think the problem is it's already disrupting the dynamic because while episode 1 had that edge of a serious thing with there are moments of levity, but you've got an actual spy thriller going on. This feels not the Lone Gunman's wheelhouse, like even remotely.
It's not just that, the tone has completely flipped. It's like, a while ago I was discussing with you Gremlins versus Gremlins 2.
Yeah.
I commented that one is a horror comedy and the other is a comedy horror.
Yes.
You've got the same kind of flip here, as the first episode was a thriller with a few comedic elements. this is a comedy.
with a few thriller moments.
Yeah.
I think I would hasten to add, though, the two Gremlins films know what they are, and they hold their universes in sync by adhering to their premises.
They're both excellent films,
They're both
too.
excellent film. Bon Jimmy Bond, unfortunately, is a terrible Lone Gunmen episode.
But it's even from that opening start with Frohike's Kung Fu.
I forgot. We need to talk about this, because this defies logic, doesn't it?
The Matrix was a very popular film, Nick.
I don't doubt The Matrix is a very popular film. Where I struggle, though, is... So, we have Frohike pretending to be a martial arts expert. I mean, you can buy all this, and then you can have him doing the wire fu. It's like, that's stretched reality. Maybe this is VR. Maybe it's not. It's when they discovered that Frohike is on a literal wire. And for those of you who've never seen behind the scenes on anything with wire fu in it, there are a lot of people with winches standing outside of shot to haul people up into the air. There are 4 people involved in this scam in Lone Gunmen.
Got to also assume that you do a lot of post work on wire fu.
Yeah,
it's not going to be that wire being totally invisible as it is now.
No, I think in the 70s and everything, generally there are ways of photographing it so it barely shows up.
But again, that's photography. It's not being in the room with it.
Yes, and also there's a lot of shots where the guy they've got tied up is looking up dead upright into the rafters where the pulleys would be. It's one of those. I understand someone said, "Oh, it's gonna be a great sight gag where he does the wire fu and then he finds the wire." Like, there's no way he's looking at the room not saying that's an awfully complicated series of pulleys up there with a wire dangling down to this man who just walked in through a sliding paper door, and this room has no roof apparently because otherwise the wires get tangled.
On the basis of my limited grasp of Japanese from my year of Duolingo courses and playing so many Yakuza games, they are actually speaking Japanese, at least in that scene.
They are. But the whole translation voice thing is really odd.
Oh, the thing in his palette.
Yeah, it's like, you can have some form of impossible tech, but you are kind of stretching credibility. And also, so they've grabbed this guy and they're going to pretend to be in Osaka. Just because they've made it look a bit like a Japanese room. And then, but they're helping an eco-terrorist, and it's this isn't your thing. Again.
If he is actually an eco-terrorist.
Well, yeah, I suppose we have to assume that. We don't know for sure. It also feels really odd that no one's tied the guy up properly.
I do love that bit where he just gets free. It's like, oh, I managed to free myself.
Like, oh, okay, right, now we're in trouble. But yeah, and then pulling the set down and them just running, it feels...
And our first butt joke.
It feels such a weird opener.
But then it doesn't connect back to anything either.
No.
Other than the fact they haven't got paid for this.
Yeah, then we reinforce the financial difficulty thing again. I'm kind of amazed that Jimmy could pay for that at the end. That feels very convenient. And how he actually found out it was even there. But yeah, but then it feels like, I mean, we made that big thing of the difference between the pilot and the first episode.
Yeah.
And there's numerous examples over the years of how this works. I mean, the X-Files is actually interesting in that while Deep Throat felt like a second pilot for the series, the actual dynamic of the show didn't change at all. You had exactly the same setup. You possibly scaled Scully back in terms of skepticism a bit because she was a bit too into believing Mulder in the pilot episode.
True.
They bound her right the way back again. And that made sense. And I'm also thinking of things like Babylon 5, which famously introduced some plot inconsistencies that were never resolved because a few key characters got recast or cut from the series.
Okay.
It's interesting that Eves, in her capacity as a mercenary, has apparently been rejigged already. Because she was, as you said, she was their foil in the first episode.
Yeah.
And now she brings them cases. That feels really weird.
And then she runs off with the money at the end.
Yeah. So why does Eve do anything for... She's got $50 million, apparently. Or possibly not $50 million. It's not actually very clear how much she got away with.
And you also don't know if she's working for someone.
No. And I don't... I don't know if we ever do.
Maybe she's in it for the thrill like Carmen Sandiego.
Maybe she is. I mean, that would be okay as a character detail for her, but we don't get that one either. She just comes and gives them this hint and then runs off again and then runs back in just before the climax. And doesn't meet Jimmy, which is an odd quirk of how they do that bit.
I guess critically, that could be another reason to bring Jimmy in, is that none of the Lone Gunmen really are a romantic foil for Eve.
Yeah.
So, you've got to leave that possibility that there'll be a will they, won't they later on. And again, if you were trying to set up Eve's will on the other ones, the only possibility is Byers, because Langley is violently asexual, and Frohickey is about 20 or 30 years older than her.
Yeah, except, of course, they've already set up there's something there.
Yeah.
Just deeply confusing. I don't understand why you've done this. I mean, we've barely talked about the actual plot of the episode, and I think it's because it's kind of nebulous and also doesn't really matter.
It's a bit mundane, and it's surprising that the Bellamisk agency let them get away at the end.
I was thinking that's what you're doing. It's not just a case of, are you not going to die? These people with guns who have no compulsion shooting all these other people.
I guess the only people they've shot have been on embassy turf, isn't it?
That I know of. But then again, the body still got handed over to the police. And there was a drug deal gone wrong, apparently, so...
It is a bit confused. So the thing that annoys me most is all the research I've had to put into blind American football for this.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about Jimmy's passion project, which I think you said while we were watching it, feels mean-spirited because this is transparently a ridiculous idea.
I think it just feels horribly ableist to me. It might be looking at this in a modern thing. I don't know if this was deemed offensive at the time. But it's the fact that the blind people all seem to be portrayed as helpless idiots. Because the second they stop playing, they all start blundering around with their arms out like Frankenstein's monster and bashing into each other.
Well, also try to dump the cooler of ice on top of Jimmy and they've got the location wrong.
Yeah. It's all a big joke at the expense of blind people who are not... Being blind does not make you completely incompetent.
No. And they do a sufficiently good job of explaining how it's supposed to work, but you can look at it and go, there are so many extra things you need. You need some kind of warning them about the boundaries of the field, for example, which doesn't seem to exist.
Right, to explain, because I've done a lot of research into blind sports over this, because I was curious what you would need, because it doesn't feel like it will work in the form presented. There is no blind American Football League as far as I can discover.
I'm guessing there's too much stuff in the air and stuff, too much jumping into possible unknowns.
There is a blind futsal league, which is what Americans would call soccer, what we call football in the UK, which is done as a five-a-side football match. You have to actually be what's called B1, so either almost totally blind or totally blind to play, unless you're the goalie, in which case you can be partially sighted. And they also blindfold every player except the goalie to make sure everyone has the same level of sight. Because, the things like this do not portray as that blindness is a scale.
Yeah.
And you can still be blind and have quite a substantial amount of vision.
Yeah.
So what they do is they have a ball that makes a jingly noise when it's kicked, so you can hear where the ball is. And also, if you are ever in possession with the ball, you have to shout out, so everyone knows where you are on the pitch too.
Yeah.
And then they also have kind of linesmen, like guides that will walk down either side of the pitch. So if the players get too far off track, they can shout out what the situation looks like dead ahead, so they can find the ball and continue again. But other than that, it functions like as soccer does, as you imagine. Yeah. I also found one account of a blind American football player whose dream is to be an NFL player but hasn't reached it yet. I think it was the Modesto Raiders they play for or something like that, a smaller team. And they explained that how they enable him to play, because he is completely blind, is essentially he has a walkie-talkie in his helmet and there is somebody at all times describing what's directly in front of him.
Okay.
But he is an incredibly good player to the degree of members of opposing teams have reported they did not realise he couldn't see, because he doesn't broadcast it because he doesn't want people to react differently to him, basically.
Yeah.
So, shows it can be done, but evidently they don't do American football, with an entirely team of blind people and just a squeaky ball like it is in this episode.
Yeah, so from what you've just described, it feels like you need a substantial infrastructure that does not exist in this episode.
Yeah, it does sound so. It strikes me, based on what I read about futsal, that it's something that maybe you could implement for American football, but it doesn't actually exist. So at least you've got the Jimmy argument of he wants to create it.
Yeah. At the same time, he can't do it alone.
Mm.
It also feels a really forced way to get him involved in the episode, since he's the front man to this shady corporation that he doesn't even know he's the front man to it.
Mm.
It just feels like such a ridiculous thing for them to bother with when there are subtler, less noticeable things that this Crooked Embassy could have gone for.
Yeah, I don't know why you would have picked this as a writer as well, just because it feels so insulting.
As you said, I mean, we've got Shaban is involved in this. We know Shaban doesn't seem to understand this.
It's kind of a joke that I would expect from a 1950s Looney Tunes cartoon.
Yeah.
Not a modern live-action series.
No, but then again, it's the early 2000s. A lot's been made about how humour ages very fast and often very badly. This probably was seen as quite, hilarious at the time.
We've seen it with a lot of Brit comedies lately who maybe were in the 90s and they made jokes about the LGBT that are no longer politically correct in any way.
Yeah.
And in recent years, they've come forward and apologised for them.
Yeah, which is good. But everyone's really proud of this series. It's one of those things that just feels absolutely wild when you read it. This hasn't shaken my impression of the Lone Gunmen to date. We'll see going forward, but it's a case of the pilot is good and has some weird flaws, but otherwise, yeah, you can see where it's going to go fine. And this episode feels like the guest star of the week has too much focus on them. Oh no, he's part of the main cast somehow.
Yeah.
Why is he part of the main cast now? And as a trajectory, it's like this one's indicative is that if this is your makeup going forward, then what?
I was trying to find out what people think of this series on the whole through using the powers of Reddit. And it's got very mixed reviews. Is people either are pretty indifferent to it or they violently hate it. There was nobody I could find that came out saying, yeah, this was a gem of television. The best I could see was, oh, it's kind of mindless fun, but it won't change your world. In particular, there was a Reddit thread I read where somebody was saying, I've watched The X-Files, is it worth watching this? And this was what came out of it. And I think one person on that Reddit thread said something to the effect of, the pilot episode is absolutely stunning, and from that point on, you'll start hating yourself, or something to that effect.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
I didn't do that one. I was trying to find some reviews because looking on Wikipedia, there's barely anything on there.
We don't have the Paul of Ataris for this one.
We don't. There's not much on the wiki either. So I looked at the IMDb user reviews, and there's like 4 or 5 for the pilot, and some of them make slightly disquieting jokes because of obviously the subject matter is a bit too close to reality.
Of course.
Other people are very pleased with it. And then it just shot down to there's one review for this episode. One. On IMDb. Yeah, only one.
Did they like it?
No. Well, they give it 5 out of 10. So it's very middling of the road.
I'd say middling's probably fair for this one.
Middling is probably fair. It's not what you want for the first proper episode of your TV series, though. Because I know it's been my drumbeat through season 8 of The X-Files is this isn't the Lone Gunmen's thing.
No.
None of this is the Lone Gunmen. Why are they here? This is so weird. Because I remember we had this debate when we first watched it. Because we went in, or as I went in, thinking, okay, so this is going to be 13 episodes of government conspiracies. Obviously, something didn't go quite right because the series got cancelled and never resumed.
Yeah.
But 13 episodes of government conspiracies, fair enough. And then we get 1 episode of government conspiracies, and then Eve says these people are stealing money, or this hacker has died, and you go, wait, what? You didn't even notice this guy. And there's a not repeated beat in both these episodes, and I don't know why we've got it, of Langley is a better hacker than this other guy.
Langley's kung fu is best.
Yes, and he's, instead of being a .com millionaire, which apparently he wants to be, he hangs out with Lone Gunmen. I'm confused.
Maybe you'll get some Langley backstory. He is the Lone Gunman who's had the least focus, really, in the series.
He is. However, you did point out to me that there's episodes with Frohike in the title. There's episodes with Byers in the title. There's an episode with Jimmy Bond in the title. There's an episode with Eves in the title.
For the record, there are 2 Frohike titled episodes, 2 Jimmy ones, 1 Eves and 1 Byers, but no Langley.
And no Langley. We ain't getting anything more on Langley's backstory, are we?
I doubt it, no. Poor Ringo.
I do think it's at least hilarious that the first credit that comes up when the episode ends is Morgan and Wong, because, yeah, they created them as one-off characters who were never meant to come back again.
They are still some of my favourite characters.
Oh, I love them to pieces, but, I mean, it just feels... I mean, I think we'll have to come back to this when we get to the last episode, but I'm going to always keep circling around to Unusual Suspects, 3 of a Kind. These are your 2 pilots, add in pilot. You've got 3 episodes of how we would want a Lone Gunmen series to work, and you make Bond Jimmy Bond.
True.
What? How?
I guess we'll see how it goes next time.
We will. What do we have next? Unless you have anything else for this episode.
No, I'm good.
Stop trying to run away. Get back here. You can't get out of this easily. So next time, we have Eine kleine Frohicke. I've just read the synopsis for him. What? And Like Water for Octane, which I think is at least trying to get back to the right kind of attitude.
I do remember the plot for Like Water for Octane. I can't remember Eine kleine Frohicke.
No, okay. The second one is more, again, is a bit closer to what I expect from the Lone Gunmen. But only just. As we said before, if you're a passionate defender of the Lone Gunmen, we'd really like to hear from you. Our email address is thingsgettingstrange42@gmail.com.
You can also find me on social media. And please, as Nick says, do let me know your feelings towards this. I'll be happy to bring them up at the start of the episode, along with anything else you got going on at the moment. So any X-Files fan events, conventions, art, fan fictions, anything you got on the go, just do hook me up. We're on Twitter and Tumblr at GetStrange42. We're on Mastodon at GetStrange42 at universedon.com. And on Facebook, where you can find us by searching for Things Are Getting Strange and X-Files Rewatch Podcast. Also, if you're not sick of my voice right now, I also stream live on Twitch TV. That's Mondays and Wednesdays at 8 PM GMT and Saturdays at 5 PM GMT. My username is AdverseCamber42. I stream on the PlayStation 5. At the moment, my games of choice are the Silent Hill 2 remake and Psychonauts, which was originally a PS2 game. I've almost finished Silent Hill, so by the time this airs, I might have moved on to my next game, which is going to be Yakuza 3.
We have a Patreon, patreon.com/thingsargettingstrange, where for as little as $3 a month, you can help us keep the lights on and have access to our bonus stuff, which includes a complete Let's Play of the X-Files game, where that guy who was in the pilot episode was also in, that we can't even pin down who he was, but he's in there.
And also Craig Wilmore.
Who died repeatedly at our hands, and other people's hands. Our theme song is Envision by Kevin MacLeod. You can find it on Compotech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, please remember...
Hope this isn't Bertram's blood.